the first half of his World's Week memories. It's time to hand over to Mark Rosewater and first Randy Buehler.
Thanks, Rich. I am Randy Buehler, joined by Mark Rosewater. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks.
Now, Mark has been, this is his 20th World Championships.
20, yep, out of 21.
20 of them out of 21, insane. And so we thought it'd be fun to just walk through Mark's memories of all of those different worlds. I mean, kicking it off, the very first world, so this is 1994. Magic debuted at Gen Con in 93. A year later, we're back at Gen Con. This is when Gen Con was still in Milwaukee.
Yep.
The tournament is a single elimination tournament, 512 person, single elim tournament, eventually won by Zach Dolan. And you played in this tournament?
Yes, I played. So what happened was, Wizards decided that, like, at Gen Con, there were a lot of events, a lot of big championships happened there. Like, okay, we came on strong last year, we're going to have a world championship. And so they did is they seeded it throughout the whole tournament, like, there were a couple days tournament. And so there were flights, and you could play in any of the flights, and in fact, you could play in multiple flights if you lost.
So stand in line and get into worlds.
Yes, exactly. And it was single elimination, so you lose once, you're out. So they're best of 3 matches, and when you lose, you're gone. And then if you made, I think, top 8 of each of the flights, you advance to the final 64.
Okay.
And then another single elimination tournament at 64, and we got down to 4 people, 2 people from Belgium, 1 from France, and 1 from the United States. Zach Dolan of the United States and Bertrand Lestrade of France end up in the finals. Best of 3. Zach Dolan takes it, and it becomes the first world champion.
And now you were actually doing a lot of the coverage for this tournament?
Yeah, so here's what happened was I actually flew to this event because I wanted to do more work for Wizards. So at the time, I was the puzzle guy. I made the puzzle that was in the Duelist, and I wanted to do more than just do the puzzles. So Catherine Haynes was the editor, so I flew myself to Gen Con to talk to Catherine, and so Catherine's like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I could write whatever. And she goes, well, pitch me. Tell me what you want to do. And I said, okay, what if I covered Worlds? We're doing Worlds here.
Wow.
What if I wrote about the tournament? And I actually, so if you ever see, there's a classic picture that's the 2 of them playing, and in the background is a very young me, like writing on a piece of, I was recording everything. In fact, there is, we have this online, I actually transcribed the entire tournament. Because remember at the time, we didn't tell decks. You didn't know what the decks were. We wouldn't tell you what the decks were. Because Wizards believed that they didn't want to, it's supposed to be a secret, and they didn't want people to know. So for the first year or 2 of Magic, we didn't tell decks. And so I transcribed everything that happened, and people would go through my transcriptions to try to figure out the decks.
Oh, crazy.
Because as I would mention cards, they go, okay, we know this card's there. And so I went, like, literally, we have, like, hand by hand by hand, here's what's played, you could set it up and walk through.
Okay, so that was Zach Dolan over Bertrand Lestrade.
Yes.
And they're playing what we would now call vintage, I guess.
Yes,
At the time it was just Magic.
Right,
I mean,
Magic. They were playing
boxes,
Magic.
and Zach had a control deck. And so I guess your attempts to impress Wizards must have worked, because by the time we get to the next World Championships in 1995, as I understand it, you're on your way to working at Wizards.
Yes. So what happened was I was successful in getting to start to write for the Duelist. I wrote in every single episode of the Duelist from then.
Sure.
And then that got me because I turned my work in on time and I was a decent writer, I started working for other sections of the company.
Sure.
And so at some point I had done jobs for 7 sections of the company, and they said to me, or I said I'd be willing to move there, and they said, when can you start, was the line. So this time it's
them flying you to Gen Con.
Right. So
so
not Gen Con.
Oh, it's not Gen Con, right? It's Seattle.
In Seattle. So the Red Lion Inn, which is near the airport. So what happened was Peter Atkinson was the CEO originally, one of the founders of Wizards, and he's like, okay, we're bigger than we don't want to be part of
we're bigger than Gen Con.
We want to be our own thing. And
Sure.
so, okay, we're going to have our own tournament. So we set it up, and it was at the Red Lion Inn Hotel, and everybody flew in, and I got flown in for this event to work it.
Okay.
And so what happened was, it's like, okay, previously, I think there had been only 3 countries that had run nationals for the 94, which was Belgium and France and
Right, so the 95 Worlds, this is a closed event. You had to win your nationals, and it wasn't super large, right? 71 players from 19 countries is what I've got written down here.
Yeah.
And it was sealed deck plus Type 2.
Yes. Finally, there were formats. We introduced Type 2, and so what happened was all these teams converged. Now, I had a little goal. I had been flown in to help, and I really wanted to play up the team aspect. I knew there were 19 different countries being represented, so I said, we should do a team event. And they're like, well, we have a lot going on. No. And I'm like, well, but come on, we could, we're going to be recording this anyway. Just let them play off at the end. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And so I finally said, well, could I track it? Could I? And they said, fine. fine. You can track it. So there's this big whiteboard at the back, and I wrote all the teams, and every round, as we get the data, I would change them all and always list the order of the teams.
Nice.
Now, the U.S. team was dominating. So the U.S. team was Mark Justice, Henry Stern, Mike Long, and Pete Lyer.
Yep.
I mean, all staple Pro Tour players. In fact, their finish, the average to make top 8 was their team average.
It's pretty good.
So 2 of the members, both Justice and Stern, made it into the top 8. Long was 1 out and Pete was 2 out.
Yeah, and so it sounds like all the teams are watching your whiteboard.
Yes.
They were totally into it.
Oh, yeah, so I keep doing this. And clearly the United States was on top. But as I would change things, I mean, you could just tell how important it was. Like,
Okay.
they were all watching it, and, you know, it really became this thing where people really cared. And it made me realize how important the team event was, that the people had pride in their team, and every time when I would update, they would just gather around as I was erasing and writing things up.
So you basically invented the team format.
Yeah, so that's one of my
Good job.
faves.
It's a lot of fun. We're all happy to be here this week. And then so it's Alexander Blumke from Switzerland defeats Mark Hernandez in the finals. Blumke, by the way, I was looking at the deck list, he's playing discard in the rack.
Yes.
It's like the little kid discard deck that we've all played at some point, and Blumke managed to win Worlds with it. Pretty cool.
Yeah, so the neat thing about that was, so I was a spotter. So what it means is I was the guy that stood with a little microphone talking to the people who were doing the commentary, and I was behind watching things. And early on, eventually, I would be one person running producing the videos. By the time I was a spotter, so it was very, very interesting. Like, one of the things I remember is Henry Stern. Henry and I were very good friends. We both were from Los Angeles, and I was standing watching Henry play, and he had 5 turns to draw forest, and he would win. And like, if any of these turns he could draw forest, he'd beat Hernandez. His deck was a great matchup for both the people on the other side of the bracket.
So he would have beat Blumke in the finals?
You know, and I think he would have beat Blumke in the finals. His deck he was playing Vice Age, and I remember.
Oh, sure.
So anyway.
So instead, we have a Swiss world champion in '95.
And one of the things they asked permission was whether or not they could speak in a language other than English in the finals.
Okay.
Because they both speak French.
Sure.
And it was ruled that they could, so.
Interesting. So 1996 Worlds, it's in Seattle again, and Tom Chamthang from Australia is the winner. Crazy part about Chamthang, I mean, he beats Mark Justice in the finals, which I know there's an interesting story around, but Chamthang's deck list, he's playing a white weenie deck, except he's playing Sleight of Mind, both so that, you know, he can sleight his pump knights to have protection for whatever color was relevant, except he forgot to register Addercar wastes.
Yes.
So actually has this uncastable Sleight of Mind in his main deck and another one in his sideboard, because he didn't have any blue mana.
Yes, I mean, there's some famous examples through Pro Tour history of people recording the things wrong and having to play with what they recorded rather than what they meant to play. And this is a very famous example of that.
Yeah, now tell me the story about Mark Justice, though. Mark Justice finished second here, and the way I hear it, he probably coulda, shoulda won Worlds.
Yeah, so what happened was, Mark Justice, I mean, for those that don't know, back in the day...
Oh, he was the man.
He was the man. Like, if you had polled Magic players and said, who's the best player on the face of the earth, 99% would have said Mark Justice.
Sure.
He clearly had come in he won 95 U.S. Nationals. He came in 3rd in 95 Worlds. So now it's 96. He comes in top 8 of the very first Pro Tour. He's in Worlds. He makes top 8. Everyone's like, and we get down to the finals, which now Tom Chamthang was this unknown.
Oh, yeah.
You know, this is his first top 8 ever, and everybody expected Mark to win. Now, Tom did have a white weenie deck designed to beat Necro. Mark was playing Necro. So on paper, Tom had some advantage, but personality-wise, clearly Mark Justice was the man.
Yeah.
And there's a very, very famous example where Mark does this double consult. So demonic consultation was you paid mana, you lost the top 6 cards to your library, and you went till you found your card.
Right, now this was as a response to an Armageddon, or? I
think so, yeah.
Or it might have been a balanced Zernor, but I mean, Mark went to go get, so he did demonic consultation for Dark Ritual in response to demonic consultation for Dark Ritual.
Yes.
And the problem was the first consult ate his entire library, and so the second consult didn't have enough library to go get. He should have just waited to see what happened from the first one. He could have floated the black mana, but it seems like he got the timing a little wrong.
And he got nervous. I mean, Justice was a great player, but he got a little bit rattled, I think, in this. You know, he really, really wanted to become world champion. It was really important to him, and he fumbled it. I mean, this is the example of fumbling the ball, you know,
happens
metaphorically.
Somebody had be the first guy to punt the world championship. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I guess so. Fair enough.
Real quick, one other very interesting thing about this one was when you said it was in Seattle, it wasn't just in Seattle, it was at our corporate headquarters.
Oh, okay.
We literally was in the building that we ran, you know, the Wizards Coast building.
Nice.
We shut down for a week, and everybody came into our building, and like literally, like, you know, we cleared some of our desks so people could play. And this was the first time we had a team event. So the USA.
Oh, so it's now officially a team event.
Right now, officially a team event.
It's not just you with a whiteboard.
Right. And then there's the finals, which they play each other. And so Team Czech Republic, with Jakub Schlemmer, I believe, as their captain, played against Team USA, and USA won for the second time. But the Czech put up a really good fight. There was a lot of we'll hear more of.
Oh no, it's the next part of the story, right? 1997 Worlds is the very next one. Again, it's in Seattle, and it's won by the very guy you were just talking about, Jakob Schlemmer from the Czech Republic, wins in the finals, and in the teams for the first time ever, it's not the United States that wins.
Yes. So what happens there is, I blank their name.
Canada.
Who was the U.S. team captain? Justin Gary. Justin Gary was the team captain. They won, and everyone expected the U.S. team to, like, they'd won the previous 2 years. In fact, we were shooting. This was the very first show we shot for ESPN2. We were on ESPN, and so we were really worried that the U.S. team wouldn't look good on camera. So we ran all over the city to find like American flag shirts, and like it took forever. We finally got them, put them on them, and they don't make top 2.
Oh my!
I think it was Canada versus.
I don't have it written down.
Sweden, my guess, Sweden or Finland.
Yeah, that World was also the debut of the extended format and the debut of Rochester Draft as a format.
Yes, yes.
Lots of cool formats coming out of Worlds.
Well, the other thing was, so we were in Seattle, but this time, Wizards had started a series of stores, so Wizards of the Coast retail stores.
Right.
And our kind of our showcase store was in the University District by University of Washington, and so the Worlds was in the basement of our showcase store.
That store was awesome.
Yeah, and so we had the problem was the ceilings were low, and we had to shoot the show, and so like our boom was so low that like it couldn't go up.
Oh,
like
crazy.
We positioned above the thing, and like we couldn't move it.
All right, well, let's talk 1998 Worlds. Still in Seattle. This one I know was at the University of Washington.
Yes.
I know that because this is the first one I played in.
Yes.
You know, John Finkel and I had actually been flying around the world to Grand Prix, jousting for the Player of the Year title. It's kind of the first time that Player of the Year title really became a thing where people were chasing pro points for. And I mean, all anybody remembers is John with the with his first Player of the Year.
Yeah.
John makes top 8 at that event. I only finished 12th. So yeah, John got the Player of the Year, but Brian Selden got the World Championship title.
Right. So the big thing about that year was the U.S. had been dominant all year. They'd won every single Pro Tour event. And the question was, could U.S. finally, sweep the year? And so the top 8 actually was 7 Americans.
And Raphael Levy.
And Raphael Levy, 1 Frenchman. So what happened there was, my personal story here was my sister got married that Saturday. So the event was Wednesday through Sunday in Seattle, Washington, and my sister was getting married on Saturday in Cleveland, Ohio. So what I did was I was there Wednesday and Thursday, flew home Friday and Saturday, and flew back on Sunday.
Crazy.
Like on the earliest thing, because we were shooting for ESPN again.
Right.
And so, in fact, my normal commentators were Chris Bakula and Brian Weissman, and then Chris Bakula makes top 8.
Holy Bakula!
So who did I get to fill in?
That would be me.
Yes, this is Randy's first ever doing commentary.
Yep.
Was at Worlds '98, and
you yanked me.
I yanked you.
You pulled me out of the booth when Bakula lost and put him back in.
Yeah, so I flew in. I get in right as the quarterfinals are ending. So the way it worked on ESPN was we didn't show the quarterfinals. We usually only showed the finals, sometimes the semifinals. And so what happened was Chris was my go-to guy. So I asked Chris if he felt up to do the commentary. He said yes. So Chris did commentary in a top 8 that he was in.
Yep.
So he did the semis and the final commentary. I did have to boot Randy.
Yep. All right, well, let's talk about 1999, because start to get a huge name kind of bursting on the scene. This is the event. We're in Japan, so it's the first time the Worlds has been held anywhere outside of the United States.
That's right.
And Kai Budde, who had won 3 Grand Prix, has his first big Pro Tour finish, wins Worlds, and wins his first Player of the Year title.
Yeah, so what happened there was Kai had done really well on the Grand Prix scene.
Yes, so this is now the 99 Worlds in...
Yeah, 99 in Yokohama, Japan.
Yokohama, absolutely.
And so, which is like a suburb of Tokyo. So, we were out of the United States for the first time. It's the first time we have a foreign Pro Tour. And this person that nobody from Wizards really knew, and they were kind of nervous, like, who is this guy? I'm like, no, he won 3 Grand Prix. Like, I'm trying to defend him, saying that I've seen him play. This is a really, he's an up-and-comer. Don't worry. And the finals were between him and Mark Lepine, who was an American, and they were both playing mono red decks. And my big memory of this tournament was we were shooting for ESPN, that it was 3 games, he won 3-0. They were so fast that us showing every minute of every game that they played, we couldn't fill the half hour the show was. Like, we had to show semifinal stuff because it was so bleedingly fast.
Kai smashed him pretty quick.
And this is also one where finally the U.S. gets a real challenge on their hand in the team tournament. They're playing against Germany, led by Marco Blum, who would later be very famous playing with Kai and Dirk
on the Phoenix Foundation.
in Phoenix Foundation. And they're playing in one of the biggest... Marco's an awesome player, very, very good player, has 2 wins to his name, but he... cast Covetous Dragon, not realizing he had no artifacts in play, because he always had artifacts in play.
Yep.
And he played his dragon and it just died instantly. And like, you know.
Not Marco's finest moment.
Not his finest moment. And I think Zvi was on the U.S. team that won that year.
Yeah.
But the U.S. team managed to win again. There was the first year where really there was a question whether they were going to pull it off or not. And they managed to beat Germany.
All right, so 2000, I definitely want to talk about this one. I think this is the single most dominating performance anybody ever had at
Yes.
Worlds. John Finkel is, to this day, the only guy to hold up both trophies. You see him in both trophy shots here.
Yep.
He got the individual world title, beating Bob Maher in just a spectacular final, and was a member of that U.S. national winning team.
Yes. So once again, we were shooting for ESPN and doing the show, and one of the things we were trying to do is make sure we got all the shots. And so that because he was playing in both events, that we had to, like, everything had to be strung out consecutively. And I remember, so first of the team event, the way it worked was there were 4 of them at the time. So right now we have only 3 players, even though there's 4 members of the team, only 3 of them are playing at once. And a lot of that reason's because of what happened in 2000. Because it was 4-on-4, it could tie. And the rule was if there was a tie, then the team captains would play off. And so John was the team captain of the US. Ryan Fuller was the team captain of Canada. And so they played, and then you know, they had to play off again, and it took forever. In fact, Aaron Forsyth, my boss,
oh yeah, you
Aaron
can see him
was on the winning team. In fact, there's Magic R&D actually has a history of having a whole bunch of winning team, people who won the world's team. Besides Aaron, Zvi Mauschwitz worked in R&D, Mike Donay, Matt Place, a bunch of different people.
Yeah, I think you see Aaron is now your boss, but there he is in the...
Yes, and in fact, Aaron was the one, by the way, it came down to Aaron, because what happened was John won, and the other 2 matches were lost. Canada won them. And so if Aaron didn't win, Canada was going to win. And if Aaron won, then it went to the tiebreaker. And John already beat Ryan once, so it's like, oh, probably he can beat him again.
Yep.
So it came down to Aaron winning.
Yep, so 2001, that was in Brussels, Belgium, by the way. 2001, we go to Toronto, Canada. It is Tom Vandelot who ends up winning Worlds. And the United States does get another of its team wins. But for me, the big news here is it's really Kai. Kai finished 44th at that Worlds, but he clinched his 2nd Player of the Year title, first guy to ever win 2 Player of the Year titles. It's only Yuya has joined him in that ever since. I mean, John had, I think, a 1st, a 2nd, and a 3rd in those 3 years. But Kai is your first 2-time Player of the Year. And you were telling me that John almost made top 8 at this Worlds?
Yeah. So John was playing in the last round, and he had a
curse scroll?
A curse scroll, and he had like 5 chances to hit. And he missed 5 times his curse scroll and didn't make it to the finals because he just missed 5 times. So, you know, and John took it well. He's like, you know, hey, Magic has its moments where sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But he almost made another world. John has a couple top 8 worlds on his resume.
All right, well, I think I'm gonna have to stop you there.
Okay.
We'll keep going next time around, and then we'll come back on this tomorrow. But right now, it's time for round 5. So I'm gonna send it straight to the booth. Let's get down to Tim Willoughby and Ben Stark for more coverage of the World Magic Cup.